So what are some things that we can look at? How can we determine whether a plant's habitat grown? It's not something that everyone's familiar with, but here's a really good example of how different two plants can look. So on the left here, we've got a Copiapoa columnar alba from habitat, and on the right, we've got one from cultivation. So you can see here very clearly the differences between the two plants. They really look nothing alike. And these kind of characteristics are similar for a lot of plants which have been poached from habitat. So you can have microorganisms, algae, lichen growing on the spines or on the plant itself, sun bleaching of trichomes, thickened farina. So that's the epidermal wax, which you can see on plants. It's usually a lot thicker and a lot harder, or a little bit eroded even on habitat plants. Broken and worn trichomes. So often when plants are taken from habitat or transported, these types of characteristics are damaged, as well as the roots as well. It's very common for habitat plants to have their roots completely cut off or very badly damaged, which is really unlikely for a cultivated plant, for example. So the general checklist for all plants, whether it's a Cordex plant, whether it's a succulent, you can look, does it have damaged roots or no roots? Is there damage to the body, leaves or other parts, from any other tools used when it's being extracted? Another really important thing to look at is the clay, or like the type of soil. A lot of soil and habitat is clay, so it's been chemically eroded, and it's a very special type of soil which is not usually associated with cultivation. Traces of the other kind of microbes in life which live in that habitat. So there are very specific types of lichen and other algae which grow on Copiapoa, for example, and even conophytums and other Cordex plants which are endemic to that area. So that's a really specific signal that plants come from that habitat. You can always go straight to a CITES approved nursery, although that doesn't always mean whether the plants are actually have come from habitat or not. But it's always good to check with a community expert if you're unsure. We've got some other examples of some different types of infographics which focus on different species, not cacti. So we know that Dudley is being really poached through California, other parts of the United States, down into Mexico. But unfortunately, with Dudley, it can be quite difficult to tell if it's being poached or not. So we've got an example here of a cultivated plant and a habitat plant as well. So it can be quite tricky with Dudley's. Something which is much more easier is Dioscorea mexicana. So plants of this general size, if you're seeing them being sold in bulk, it's a pretty high alert that it's actually come from habitat, as no cultivated Dioscorea mexicana are commercially available due to the field collecting. It's very difficult to actually get seed, but some of them are being propagated. So we have an image here from Al Klein from the United States. He's an experienced grower of Dioscorea mexicana, and so after 1 year, you can see that they're the size of a small marble. So they're an incredibly slow growing plant. So you always need to be cautious of really large Cordex plants that you see, especially stuff with no roots or stuff that's damaged. Ariocarpus, it's another cactus genre that's really heavily poached, but you can see quite clearly here the difference between a cultivated plant and a habitat plant. So that really sort of weathered, dry, corking, damaged tissue is pretty much the biggest indicator of a lot of habitat plants. So you can see on the image on the left there, classic Ariocarpus, which have been taken from habitat, and they really just look nothing like a nice cultivated plant. This is what a typical cultivated plant looks like. Nice nappy-form taproots intact, really green photosynthetic tissue. So what does poaching look like online? Here we have a lot of Copiapoa columnar alba which have been taken from habitat. They've got all the characteristics which I pointed out before. The image on the left there is a classic. There's just no roots. You can see that cork cambium tissue, the white farina, and if you take a close look, the damaged spines. And there's a lot of foreign websites, especially from Asia, that look like this, where you can see habitat plants obviously in the images, really high prices. And this is a strange genus from Africa, Opococaria, which has actually been really targeted and is really desirable for Asians. So there's a lot of these plants appearing overseas, and you can see that they also paint the rootstock there, or the base of the plant when they transport it as well. So that can also be a sign that that the plants have been poached from habitat. So social media seems to have, I mean, poaching's been an issue for quite a while, but the social media problem has really escalated the situation. Yeah, this is just typically what it looks like on Instagram, and people are posting bare-rooted plants, which are obviously from habitat. There's not a lot of shame in it at all. It's quite in your face a lot of the time. But the problem is you can see this image of a habitat plant that's it's been in cultivation for a while, but it's still got those characteristics. And you can see the comments. It's a real beauty. Wow, I'd like to have one for my collection. It's hard to get this in the US. A lot of people liking the post to get shared, and that creates lust and desire for these types of plants. To have something essentially special. That's come from the desert. And this is what it looks like. This is actually an auction table. This got sent to me from someone in Japan. So it resembles like rhino horns and ivory and stuff like that. So these are sort of like really black market kind of deals, and essentially people go to these kind of places, and they can all occur in the same. There's the black market auction essentially, where they do have things like ivory and also plants available all at the same venue for people who are sort of are drawn to that type of thing. So you can see really old and damaged roots of Copiopoa from habitat. The thing is that it's not, once these things have been taken from habitat, it's almost impossible to put them back into their habitat, because they take so long to develop their root systems, which they're really dependent on. They need to have that really well developed to survive in habitat. And some of the types of habitats, the terrain, the geology, the topography is so specific that they just cannot be transplanted into a rock fissure, into a grit pan, or wherever they've come from. And this is actually the Chilean investigations team looking into the habitat of poached Copiopoa and what it actually looks like, getting familiar with it. So it's good to see that Chile's actually paying attention to the issue. They've got some more images of Pachypodium rosculatum species, which made their way to Asia. So they've just got the classic appearance, that really weathered type look, no roots or damaged roots. And this is what they look like in typical niche stores in places like Japan and Tokyo. Conophytums are obviously a really highly poached plant, and something which is becoming really endangered, especially certain species in Africa. And this is what a typical conophytum plant looks like on, for sale on Instagram. Well, if you want to know a little bit more about me, you can look me up on my website, cactusexplorer.com, and my contact information is there if you need to contact me directly. And a couple of references from the talk.